So we did a little bit of a warm-up before we started this, but imagine I just asked you to write me the equation for this one. Everybody start with y equals 1 over x, because that's kind of what it's like, except it's been moved. You should be able to start with this, tweak it a little bit, because it's been moved where? Compared to the standard 1 over x graph, it's been moved, say the word. Come on, which way has it been moved? Nobody in here can tell that this has been moved up? Seriously? That's been moved up. How far has it been moved up? It's 2. So that if it's up 2, you just put a plus 2, and there's your equation. Do you get how that wasn't too hard? Now, what if it also had a hole in it? Let's say it had a hole at 4. That would look like this. There'd be an empty spot written on the graph like this. Not solid, Mr. Server, empty. An empty circle like that. Well then, if there was an empty spot at 4, that means in the fraction part, there would be something that would cancel and makes the hole there, right? And what would cancel would have been not an x plus 4, but an x minus 4 and an x minus 4. Do you understand that part? Okay. All right, let's go on this page. So they're talking about how to find the horizontal asymptotes. The good part is, I already taught you that several days ago. So this lesson's going to go quick. If you look at this in the long run, like you put in x is 1,000, do you get that it's pretty much touching 0? Technically, it's not touching it. It's just that you can't tell the difference. It's so close to the asymptote that you can't tell. So do you get that this has a horizontal asymptote at 0? Remember, horizontal means this way. And horizontal are the horizontal asymptotes. And it pretty much is getting closer and closer to 0. The way I would have said to do that is to take your equation, which is this one, and pro tip, don't stick the 1,000 into that because you're going to get really confused. If you can factor it, you should, and you factor it first and then stick the 1,000 in. All right, let's go on to this page. They got weirder. The horizontal asymptote is diagonal on this one. And then it's got a vertical asymptote like there that it actually crosses. Do you remember me saying that it's possible to cross the verticals? It's rare, but you'll never cross the horizontal. But you could cross the vertical asymptote. See how it did that? And it happens near 0 when it does. So I know you were told that you just never cross the asymptotes. You get closer and closer but never touch them. But that was like keeping your life simple. Kind of like don't talk to strangers. But if you're in Alaska on the side of the road, freezing to death, and some stranger goes past in a car, wouldn't you like them to stop and talk to you for a second so they can save your life? Yeah, there's moments when talking to a stranger might be your only option to live because you'd freeze to death out in Alaska on the highway given enough time. So the simple rule is never talk to strangers. The simple thing on this, they never cross an asymptote. But there's rare exceptions only on the horizontals where it can cross. All right, let's go to this page. Again, you see how the asymptotes go on this one? Diagonal asymptotes, that's a thing, but we're not testing you on them, so don't stress about them. Now, if we talked about where that horizontal asymptote would be, we're going to only do that when there are more normal graphs, and we've told you about the 1,000 trick. So if I just asked you to look at this graph and say, way, way, way over there, what's it going to get closer and closer to? 0. then there's an asymptote at 0. That's the way you ask yourself, where should the horizontal asymptote be? It's like, if I go way to the right or way to the left, what's y going to get closer and closer to? All right, let's go to this page. And this is a nice normal one, like we would actually test you on. Would you please figure out, remember, if you can factor it, you should. Then cancel stuff. Then the domain is what you can safely feed the function. Horizontals use the 1000 idea. Verticals, that's the things that make the bottom 0. And wholes are what canceled out. See if you can answer these critical 4 questions. I'll pause while you try it. Here we go. Let's start by factoring. If you can factor, you should. Hakan, can you factor the top?
Yeah, you get x plus 4, x minus 1.
I agree. How about the bottom?
X plus 3, x minus 1.
What was the thing that was going to cancel then?
X minus 1.
Immediately creates a
Whole.
The whole is at
1.
1 comma. How do you get the other part?
You plug it back into the equation.
Yes, not the original one, or you'd get 0 over 0. It goes here, and you get?
5 over 4.
Raise your hand if you had 1 comma 5/4. Nice. Then the domain is what this function can safely be fed. I understand how people are going to forget this, but you have to say all things except. You have to say the all real numbers thing. All real numbers, except it can't be fed. You cannot give it a -3. And let me ask you this. Can you give it a 1? No, because there's a hole there. It doesn't have an answer at 1. You also cannot feed it 1. I know some of you would have been not sure about the 1. A hole means the function doesn't exist there. All right, horizontal asymptotes. That's the 1000 trick. If you put it in here, you'll suffer. Because you'll be like, do I keep the 3000 or not? Do I factor that in with the 2000? And then what you really have to do is, some of you have learned this now, you put in an even bigger number, like a billion on the top and the bottom. And you end up realizing that these actually don't even matter. Because once you get to the billion level, this dominates. And it will pretty much be a billion over a billion squared, which is even bigger, but pretty much 1. Y equals 1. Raise your hand if you had 1. Cool. If you don't understand that, then I don't think you really understand the 1000 trick. And you should change that in your head to try 1000 and then try an even bigger number and see if they're coming out to the same thing. If you put in 10,000, doesn't it still come out to about 10,000 over 10,000, which is pretty much 1? Yay. All right. There are your answers. The only thing we could do to make this test harder than just that would be to say graph it. And so I want you to just find me these 2 points, which would be critical, on either side of the asymptote. Remember the asymptote, the horizontal is the vertical asymptote, which I never actually wrote. X equals -3 was the vertical asymptote. Sorry, forgot to put that in there. -3 is the asymptote. I always write it like this. Then I put in a number on either side, -2 and -4. Try it, please. What point do you get when you put in -2 and -4? Because if you can just graph those, the asymptote and the point on either side of it, you can kind of fill in the rest by knowing that it gets closer and closer to the asymptotes. So this is kind of the last missing piece. Can you find me a couple points? One on each side of the asymptote. I'll pause for a second while you try those. Put in -2 and -4. Okay, so the -2 goes in. The -2 goes in where? Well, I'm going to rewrite my answer. It was x plus 4 over x plus 3, and then I stick in the -2 here and here, and I get 2 over 1, which is 2. Raise your hand if you had -2, 2. Awesome. And the -4, you stick it in here and here. And wait a minute, Mr. Server, you you'd killed the function. It's got a 0 on top. Nope. What does 0 on top mean? It just means the answer is 0. That's a place. -4 comma 0. 0 on top is fine. And then if I had to sketch this thing, I'd go my x asymptote, which is a vertical, as in vertical asymptote, would be here. And then I'd go to negative. Oh, wait. And where was the horizontal again? The horizontal was at 1. It's like right there. And then -2, 2 is like there. And -4, 0. Wait a minute. I'm wrong. That's where -2, 2 is. -4, 0 is more like this. And there's my answer. Closer, closer, never touch. Goes through that point. Goes through this point. Closer, closer, never touch. There's my answer. Oh, and what did I forget? So easy. The whole. The whole is at 1 comma 5/4, so I go over to 1 comma 5/4. Over 1 is like here, and oh, that's where 5/4 would be. There, now I even remember the whole. It's going to happen to a lot of you on the test. You're going to forget that whole. It'll hurt, because it costs at minimum 5% off your grade. Sometimes the whole point. And therefore 10% typically, because there's only 4 hard problems on the test. All right, I think we've done enough. I think you are understanding what you need to for today. The big goal was how to find these horizontal asymptotes, and I've already told you, put in the 1,000 idea. And now let's get to the homework. Everybody, please open up that homework. I've heard that number 10 has an issue, so we're going to cross off problem 10. Skip number 10. Did you find it yet? Could you read me number 1?
F of x equals 3 parentheses x minus 7, then x plus 7 other parentheses.
Plus 7?
Yeah.
Okay, and then?
Over 2x, then parentheses x minus 7.
All right. Do you see what cancels? Read what cancels. That part. It makes a what? Whole. It makes a whole. At 7 comma. Now, I'm assuming they're asked about the whole. Did they? I figured they would. 7 comma what? Well, then I'm going to rewrite what my answer is just to clean it up. It's
Anchor time is now starting.
We will obviously start anchor time very soon. 2x like that. All right. And now I stick the 7 in there. Let's just finish this question. And I get 3 times 14 on the top, 42 over 2 times 7 is 14. 42 over 14. That's a weird one, but it's what it was. Anybody else get 42/14 before I said it? Yes, a couple of people did. Okay, good. Okay, so there's how to get the first answer. If you get stuck on your homework, you can ask. There could be a mistake in there. Is there a mistake in there, you think? Should we simplify it more? Like 42/14, you mean? Okay, so I know 7 times 2 makes 14. Oh, I see what you're doing. 2 times 42 works too. I agree, it can be simplified. What is 40? Half of 42 is 21. Oh my gosh, you can simplify even more. 21 divided by 7 is 3. Thank you. Everybody, you better fix that. It was actually 3. I didn't know that 42 divided by 14 was 3, but it is. Good catch. Thank you. All right. So there's your first problem in your homework. If you get stuck, you can ask me for help. And that's all I have for you for the video for today.